Hi there, Evic Church family. I am coming to you live from our church lobby here. Maybe you recognize the mailboxes in the background. It is eerily quiet here without people, and I really hope that soon, before too many more weeks go by, that we'll all be able to gather here again on Sunday morning. And so I am praying that way and hoping that way and looking forward to that possibility. As far as an update this week, not a lot to report to you, but do want to share a few thoughts that will hopefully encourage you this week. One of the challenges, give you a little window into the life of a preacher here. One of the challenges of someone who speaks regularly like I do is deciding what gets into the sermon and what has to be cut. I hope you realize that as long as my sermons are every Sunday morning, whether you think they're, long enough or too long or anybody out there think they're too short? I doubt it, but however long the sermons are, there's always this much information, and so something gets cut. There's stuff that I could say that ends up not being part of what I end up saying. So one of the things that I wanted to share last week, last Sunday, if you listen to the sermon, you know that I talked about complaining and what does it look like for us to complain to God about things rather than grumble to ourselves or complain to others. And one of the points that I made last week was that when we complain, we should do it with expectant hope. That is, with hope for some kind of unforeseeable good that might come out of our situation. Maybe something that we'll see eventually, maybe something that we won't even see, but some kind of good that comes out of difficult times. And I wanted to share a story with you, and this is a story that I couldn't include in my sermon last week, but want to pass along to you in this video now. It's a story about a couple named Howard and Pearl Wohlgemuth. They were a farming couple here in Lancaster County. Howard was a chicken farmer, and alongside their farming, they also had a real heart for reaching people for Christ. And they expressed that in numbers of ways. One of the ways that they did that was by going on a work trip to the island of Cuba back in the 1950s. And so they worked to repair a church building in Cuba, and afterwards they had such a heart for Cuba and for the Cuban people that they were invited to become missionaries long-term on the island of Cuba. So Howard became a licensed pastor, they took Spanish classes, they sold their farm and many of their possessions, and they moved to Cuba in 1955. If you know your history at all, that was not a great time to start long-term mission work in Cuba in 1955, because it was just a few years later that Fidel Castro came to power, that the communists revolution came, and so the Wohlgemuths were there in Cuba until 1960, when the communist revolution made it dangerous for them to stay in Cuba. And so they had started a church in Cuba and served there for about 5 years, and now they felt like they had to leave, and so they were leaving this little church, this little fledgling church that they'd started. There were a couple national leaders there, Cuban Christians, that they felt good leaving them in leadership, but they had to leave. And so they ended up moving on to Nicaragua, another Central American country, and they started a church there, which continues to this day. Then eventually they ended up in Miami, and so they helped Cubans who were fleeing the communists in Cuba and fleeing to the United States. They helped them to settle in Miami, and so they went on to continue to have fruitful ministry. But when they left Cuba, they really had no idea what would happen with this little church. And contact over some of that time anyway was very spotty, so they didn't know what was going on. Well, years pass, and they come to find out later that not only did this little church that they started survive, but it had survived amazingly well. It had thrived, and so they saw more than 5,000 people over that time come to be part of this church, come to faith in Christ and join the church after the Wohlgemuths had left. And so the national leadership that they had left behind did a phenomenal job of leading this church and helping it to grow and to spread and to multiply. The Wogmuths, I'm sure, could not have foreseen all that would have happened, the good that would have come maybe from them leaving. Maybe it was their leaving that spurred on this incredible growth in the church and the faithfulness of the leaders that remained behind. But one way or another, through whatever set of circumstances, unforeseen good came from this situation, from their faithfulness and then even their leaving, and God did something great. And there are so many stories like that, big and small, of unforeseen and unforeseeable good coming out of even our disappointments. And I hope that you're seeing that in your disappointments, that you have seen it, and that you continue to see it in days and weeks to come. We are continuing our series this Sunday, looking forward to Sunday morning. So we'll continue the point in your disappointment, and specifically we're talking about the prophet Habakkuk. And I introduced you to him this past Sunday, and we'll continue his story on this coming Sunday as well. Looking forward also to a special number by our youth choir performing virtually, so you can anticipate that. And we also have communion this week, so you will want to prepare your elements at home, bread, juice of some kind, for our celebration of communion at the end of the service. As far as what's going on around here, not much in the building, but the ministry of the church continues. Our staff continue to serve and to do what they can to minister to people and to teach and to serve from afar. One of the things that we're beginning to talk about as a staff and we're beginning to read about is just what does reopening look like? Whenever that happens, and I'm not sure that that's going to happen soon, certainly not as soon as we would like, but when that happens, what does it look like? And we want to be prepared for that. So we're starting to think and talk together about what that looks like for us. Along those lines, over the last number of weeks, I've been giving you something to pray about and kind of an action step. So in prayer this week, I would encourage you to pray for our public health officials and government leaders, particularly in relation to decisions about reopening businesses and our economy and all of those things. Those are hard calls to make. I would not want to be in that position at all. I don't know that anyone is happy with, every decision that's made. So pray for them, pray for wisdom, pray for discernment, pray for perseverance, pray for courage, for integrity, pray for all those things for our public health and government leaders. Keep praying, I encourage you. And then action for the week. Action for this week flows out of my sermon last week. I talked to you about complaining. And my encouragement to you is sometime, if you haven't done this so far this week, you've still got a couple days till the next Sunday, but catch yourself if you want to complain about something. Catch yourself before you complain to a spouse, a child, a parent, a sibling, a friend, a neighbor. Catch yourself before you complain to them and complain to God instead. That was my encouragement to you Sunday. It's my encouragement to you again today. Complain to God rather than someone else with whatever your situation, your struggle, your unhappiness is. Well, I hope you're hanging in there and continuing to see the goodness and faithfulness of God. He is good, He is faithful, and He will always be. And I wish you much grace in these days as we continue to walk with Him.